Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Game Logic from the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube, and this is the Enough to Keep Going weekly games podcast for Sunday, the 18th of June, 2023, episode number 295.
Welcome, everyone, to the Enough to Keep Going podcast. So, if you were here in the intro music, it's nice and creepy, for the heat of the summertime, but that is good. It set the mood. Last week we talked a lot about Diablo just before we dove into all of the announcements and gameplay and new footage of things. So this week we're starting off just a little bit of chills down your spine, but that's okay. That is kind of appropriate here, I suppose, for June 18th. This is Father's Day. So all of us fathers out here have felt that chill down our spine, whether it's the first time you find out that you're going to be a father, or the time that your baby wakes up in the middle of the night, or that your son or daughter says they've got their first significant other. So many chills down your spine as a father. But that's not why we're here tonight. We're not here to reminisce and coalesce around our experiences as fatherhood. We're here to talk about games. I am your host, DBQ Hams. This is, as you heard at the top of the show, this is 295. Woo. We're getting up there, inching our way toward 300 on the Enough to Keep Going podcast. Joining me tonight, Tao Master 99. Tao, how are you?
I am doing well. Thank you very much.
All right. And Game Logic, thanks for running the boards. How are you tonight?
I'm doing good.
Good.
Chose not to have ice cream at for the Father's Day dinner out, so I was like, I've got a podcast and I can't be on here zonked out sleepy for the show.
Fair enough. Well, my wife made a dessert and I had 2 helpings. So it may not have been ice cream, but I am feeling it. So if I keep wrestling in my chair, that is okay. That's just my stomach settling. So we are all good tonight. All right. So given the music, let's start off with Diablo 4. Tao, you've been playing some more Diablo 4?
Yes. I've continued on with actually both my characters, the Druid and Necromancer. I believe I'm closing in on level 20 for both of them right now. So inching my way up there. I think I mentioned last week. So the Druid, I'm kind of just doing a little bit of everything, like side quests and story and just kind of everything that I run into. But for the Necromancer, I'm just going straight into the story and just plowing through that. So I've just been kind of flip-flopping between those this past week. Pretty much all I've been playing, really, other than like a couple other games I'll talk about later. But still enjoying it. I was playing last night, and I realized like there's a lot of like traversal or just a lot of walking in the game. You get getting to point A, point B. Yeah, there's portals you can you could do, but you can't hit those portals until you actually activate them. So like if there's one like high north up on the map, I got to walk all the way over there before I can even use it. So that's the one thing I guess I can nitpick on lately that I've noticed is the traversal. Like I know I've seen you can get a horse and stuff I guess later on, and you can buff your stats for speed and stuff like that. But it's just I just kind of a pain. Like, why do I got to buff a stat for speed? Like, can I just have it, or isn't there just like another way I can just travel around a little bit faster? But plus, the druid is just kind of slow in the first place. So
you have to do that now because even what you have now is a convenience in comparison to the past history of Diablo.
Oh, okay.
Like you have now you have scrolls of town. You can activate town portals. You used to have, I mean, way back in the day, you used to have scrolls of town portal. They were limited. They took up an inventory slot. You had to work until you got tomes of town portal. So they were one use. So if you used it and burned it, you were just done. And so you would have to walk all the way back to town. And mostly those town portals are used for like escapes, like when a fight is too heavy. So you've progressed from that now to today. Then you used to have to work up to get a tome of town portal so that you could actually store 10 of the things and only have it occupy one inventory slot. So the progression of the draconian regime of walking in town portals in Diablo is significantly better today than it used to be.
Well, on Father's Day, I'm glad that we're starting off with our grumpy old man gamer moments
right.
here of like, I can't believe I have to walk all this way.
Gotta walk all that way.
Oh,
yeah. Although
back
I
in
did
my day, we had town portals.
I finally realized that you can just teleport like back to, I guess it's like the nearest town, which I didn't realize you could do at first. So that's kind of nice.
Well, and I mean, and if you think about it, like the whole thing of like town portals and things like that, like preceded this notion of fast travel being kind of a commonality in terms of game design, right? In the industry. So yeah, it's and Tao, I forgot to mention, I'll just go ahead and now while we're live. So if you have anything to like coordinate while we're in the middle of the show, we're using the private chat thing that's there in StreamYard.
So we've been talking about you the whole time and you just haven't seen it yet. It's really what Game Logic's trying to tell you. Like all of our complaining is now there for you to see. So, all right. So, I mean, I would say though, but isn't the traversal part of allowing you to interact with the world events, the public events? Like if you're only jumping from town to town, you miss that opportunity to engage in that new mechanic of having those world events, those kind of timed cooperative areas.
Yeah, I don't see a whole lot of people though when those events do pop up. I mean, most of the time I can like handle it. It depends on which character I'm using. Like Necromancers, that's pretty easy because I got all my my summons that I have now. But like if I have the druid, like I there's been times where I just had to run because I was about to die, or I had to teleport away because I was about to die. So while it's nice, like sometimes I don't have that luxury to have other people, with me. Just I don't know if you've seen that, like if like every time you see like an event like that, if there's always people around or not. So
no, I mean sometimes I've seen it where I'm the only one starting it, and sometimes I'm surprised when other people suddenly show up. What were you going to say, Gabe?
I would also say it's part of the, and I'm not approving of it. I'm just describing it. It's also kind of the legacy grind of Diablo 2. Like the walking was purposeful in that you had to walk because you would encounter things on the way, and if you had used a scroll of town portal to go back to town and then were going back to a place, you were grinding the whole way. Right, earning XP by encountering things, and I've heard some other people, I heard another podcast kind of talking about it, and I know it's not your perspective, but I think there's a lot that's getting out there that comes from the consolification of Diablo for it launching on consoles for the first time ever, and now not kind of being seen as this thing that would deploy to PC first and then would be unchained and broken free and go to consoles. Now I feel like there's a little, I don't know, it's maybe for lack of a better term, I'll call it like the entitlement of the console perspective. It's like, oh, I want to, and again, I'm not saying this applies to you. I'm talking about the other conversation.
Throwing it down at the Tao.
Well, no, it's because they were saying, I'm glad I finally got the horse, but I got the horse near the end game. And then, what bothered me about not getting the horse is that, every time I was walking around, it was always super intense. And I just, wanted to not have the stress level, like while I was transiting from point A to point B. And I was like, I get it, but that's like an endemic inherent part of the design. And you don't, And it's another weird thing that I think it's weird. I think a lot of things about the Diablo design again predate things. Like if we in another world, right? There's certain elements of this that could be considered Souls-like, you know, because you've cleared out a whole area, you're going back to a point you've been to before, and the same flipping enemies are there, like respawned all over again. You got to clear them all back out, which is exactly the part of Souls that I can't stand. Right? That's a pain that I feel like is a pain in the butt. But I guess in my head, it's always felt like the legacy aspect of Diablo, but I can't stand it in newer games. So it's just interesting.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of weird too because like I don't mind the grind, like I don't mind that, and like other games like Skyrim, for instance, I like rarely ever use the fast travel and stuff like that. And maybe because that's the first person that's maybe a little more interactive, and here it's just like a flat, like I'm on a game board, like I'm playing which I guess is kind of the point, but but I don't know, it just nerves me a little bit more than any other games have in the past. So it's just. And like I said, it's not like a huge, like I said, I'm not gonna stop playing or anything like that. It's just, like I said, it was just a nitpick, on my part.
I think it's interesting to hear you say that because I'm thinking about the map layout and it gives you the boundaries where, like in Diablo 2, the reason you walked around and kind of hugged the borders was you were trying to fill out the map. You were trying to figure out what you were missing, where here you kind of see where those corridors are, you see those paths. That map is kind of laid out for you, which is a different game design element within Diablo.
So that's a really good question. So poll for the cast: when you guys are walking around, are you still hugging the walls? Or are you? Because I mean, you can use that map just like you said, DBQ, to like beeline from point A to point B straight to your objective as best as you can. I mean, there's a little bit of like. Like sometimes it's on your map like directionally, and so you may not necessarily. But I mean, how are you guys kind of navigating the map?
I'm trying to think now. Like for me, I pretty much try to like what DB's saying. Like it doesn't kind of until you get to that area, like it doesn't open up the map. So like you'll see like, hey, my objectives in like I said, the far north. I can see the objective, but I can't see the exact path because there's been times where I've like, all right, I'm going to go to the path. I could just do a straight line. No, I got to go like all the way to the right, come all the way back, and then go up. So it's fine. Like I don't really have an issue with it. Like once you hit that area, it does open up. So it's not a super big deal for me, at least.
Sure. No, I mean, I think I'm still in that mindset of, I don't know that I hug the corners as much as I did in Diablo 2 or Diablo 2 Remastered, but it is very much that fill in all the map, right? I'm still in that mindset of, oh, I didn't go down this corridor. Maybe there's something there. Maybe there's not. Like a lot of times there's not. It just cycles you back around to another spot. Maybe you get a chest. Maybe it's not worth anything, but it is still kind of in my Diablo DNA of I'm trying to ungray that map.
Dude, I still hug the walls. I sometimes literally forget the minimap is even there. Like I don't look at it, but I still literally, I mean, the same navigation pattern that I use on Diablo 2 and Diablo 3, I still do. Now, the one thing I will do is when I am, because the other thing I was going to mention is that also is very much kind of like that Destiny 2 modality as well. But the only difference now is when I'm in like that last 30 minutes, like when I want to get done playing. And what I mean by Destiny 2, Diablo 4 also does that thing of like, oh, I want to play for like 30 more minutes. And at 25 minutes, you're neck deep into something you can't get out of, or it doesn't make sense for you to get out of, because if you leave now, you're going to have to come back and do all that stuff over. So you wind up continuing to play for like 20 minutes longer than you had planned. But now when I'm in that time zone, right, getting down to it, then I'm like, okay, let me try and kind of beeline straight towards my objective and hope to actually get this done right in my allotted playtime. But 90% of the time, I'm still hugging the walls as if I don't even have a minimap available.
So, are you hugging the walls in Wartales? So this is a game. Wartales is a game that came out in April of this year. How did this end up on your list, Game Logic? This is new for you, right? This isn't something you're coming back to.
Yeah. So I peruse the Metacritic, games published this year list very frequently. And so I kind of identified and tagged this one as a, I want to get around to play this at some point. It is an 80 on Metacritic right now. So on the PC list, which numbers about 39 games, I think, for games that have met at 80 and above. And so it's down there near the bottom. I think it may actually be like 39, or pretty close to it. But it's been on my radar and been on my list, and has been something I wanted to get around to. It is in some ways it's kind of interesting. On Twitter this week, I started seeing a little bit of chatter, and I kind of pulled back the curtain on it a little bit, and I saw that what was going on was that the guys who were doing Clockwork Revolution at Compulsion, actually, it turns out that a lot of them came out of the studio that did Arcanum of Magic Obscura, which was a steampunk RPG on PC that came out like in the early 2000s. It was one of my favorite games, just because it was steampunk, and it was very hyper stylistic, and just kind of hit everything I was looking for right at the time. Wartales is not steampunk, but it still kind of feels a little bit like Arcanum in some ways. It's a weird. It's listed as an RPG, but it's tactical. Interesting enough, we had the conversation last week about what is a tactical turn-based strategy game, what is a tactical turn-based RPG, and how they're very similar. And so you wander around the map, and again, it's very similar to other games. Another conversation we had a few weeks ago when we talked about, I think the Total War series, how we were talking about, and how the series has gone since Total War Rome, where you have this zoomed out kind of strategic view, and so you're spending time kind of roving around the map, exploring. You're picking up treasures, you're stopping by buildings and having conversations and whatnot. But then when you go into combat, then it zooms into a battlefield view, and then it's a tactical kind of turn-based RPG. So it's a little stylistic, kind of in it's by an indie studio. I can't remember the exact name of the studio now. I think it's Shinoi or something like that.
Shiro.
Okay. So it's a party-based tactical turn-based RPG. So you have a party of 4 people and a pony. Not sure why, but it's basically a pack animal that takes part of your storage. You go around the countryside, and you go to farms and the mill, and you stop by some towns, and you have these conversations, and you pick up missions along the way, and you go out and do them. And then you engage in turn-based strategy. There's some provenance for the player at the beginning, where you are able to select from kind of a list of like background kind of story, kind of like you were able to like in Skyrim and Oblivion. Like I picked that my team was like a wandering group of like bandit outlaws who had like been together since childhood or something like that, and had like struck out because I think I picked because they were being like they were being chased by the law, and so they had become this roving band of adventurers, and that was their shtick, and then there's some character configuration, character creation selections that you can make. I just went in there and hit randomize on some of the things. I will say, again, as a minority, my perspective, as I was playing the game, I was like, there aren't really necessarily any like black-skinned people in the character configurator from what I can see. There are kind of some like olive and things like that, but it just struck me as like, that's a very weird choice, and I haven't had a chance to pull the thread on on what the demographic makeup is of the studio and how that got done. But at any rate, you do this in the early goings. It's a little sparse. Like I felt like I'm there in a lot of instances I'm going in and I'm having these conversations, and they don't necessarily feel like they're being fruitful. Like there's a lot of the missions aren't like a straight up like run fetch, like go do this, come back and get your thing. It's go do this, find out where the heck that is in the first place, then maybe figure out how to do it and then come back. In some places I go in and you have like a quick exchange, like there was a guy who'd gotten like scratched by a rabid rat and was like freaking out, and you have to make a choice to kill him or not kill him, and then you get some reward because of that. I think the biggest thing I've had at this point is I wound up like chasing down an outlaw, and I kind of got ping pong back and forth between the outlaw and the town's guard, captain of the guard. It was like the outlaw was like, you need to go kill the captain of the guard because he's threatening the farmers and telling them not to give us food. And then you go to talk to the captain of the guard, and the captain of the guard is like, you need to kill the bandit outlaw leader because he's stealing food from all the farmers. So you kept going, and then I go back to the bandit outlaw guy, and he's like, what? He's like, no, I'll match his price. And I go, hold on a second. If you're a bandit outlaw, how in the world do you have the same resources as this captain of the guard? Something fishy's going on here. So I took the bandit outlaw out. So, and then everybody on the countryside, all the outlaws know, all the refugees is what they're called, know that like you're like an enemy and out to get them. So I ran into another group of these guys, and they begged for, and I beat them, and they begged for mercy. They were like, we're trying to get out of here. We're trying not to be a problem, but we can't pay the toll at the gate which is really high. Like the first gate that I encountered, I couldn't even pay the toll. So I gave them the coin to pay the toll and spare their lives, and they were like, we're so thankful, and they gave me a bow. The other thing I mentioned about how sparse it is, despite hitting two of these towns and finding like the weaponsmiths and all that kind of stuff, like a lot of the gear is still more expensive than whatever jobs I've been able to complete to buy coin. So one of the reasons why I gave them the coin to get through the gate is because in exchange for the coin, they gave me a master bow, and so my one archer, it was a significant jump for him weapons wise. So I was like, this is basically like just going to the Fletcher and getting and paying for a bow, which I can't seem to find at any reasonable cost anywhere. So, it's you can speed the game up. The transit, how you mentioned, walking around Diablo 2. There's a lot of that here too. I haven't sped the game up because you guys know I typically like let games run at regular time. So plotting around the countryside is really a trudge. So I'll probably speed that up. But it's really neat kind of tactical combat. It's a little, I guess it's pretty similar to Fire Emblem Engage, but in a more kind of, I don't want to say more mature, but, more realistic, kind of less cartoony approach. And I think it auto-generates classes for you. I think you can go in and choose to differentiate that, but I just took the stock ones that it depending on the background that you picked, it gives you different set of classes for starting classes. So it gave me like 2 rangers, an archer, and a brute, which is basically like a warrior or a barbarian to start out with. So, but other than that, it's pretty cool. I'm just looking for it to kind of pick up the pace a little bit, and I think it's got a lot of potential. Just in terms of I'm only on like one provincial area on the map. There are apparently like 5. And all of them like have to be like explored in their entirety for you to actually, do all the things in the game. And then it's got, tons of replayability because you can just roll new characters, right, and do the thing all over again. So it's pretty cool. And good in a year where there's tons of AAA games out. Like I always say, take 5 minutes to take an aside and play some indies. And so this is a good pickup, I think.
So is it because it's like is it a shared space? Like, is it as a survival game? Are there other players in your instance, or is it all kind of a single player experience? So you're not having to deal with other people and combating for resources or space or things like that.
As far as I know, it's just single player. I didn't see any choices for multiplayer in there.
All right. Well, let's jump from an indie to a big AAA game, but unfortunately one that also has very limited representation in terms of diversity. And that's gotten a couple hits on it in terms of the Final Fantasy 16. There's the Eurogamer story this week in terms of some people talking about boycotting it. There's been questions around the developers in terms of the lack of diversity within the setting. All that said, had a chance to play through the PlayStation 5 demo, and I came away a whole lot more positive than I expected. I wanted to play it just out of curiosity. I started playing it, and within like the opening, it's beautiful. But within the opening, I thought, oh, I think I just want to play some more Final Fantasy 15. Like the characterization there was good between those, the four friends. And in some ways, this demo does what it's supposed to do, right? It sets up this grand kind of medieval story, but it takes some twists that I thought they were telegraphing, and it twists them a little bit. And so, the way it ends kind of toyed with my expectations, but the combat itself was really fun. I mean, it is more actiony. It's more actiony than Final Fantasy 15. It's more actiony than FF7 Rebirth. It is magic attacks as range attacks. It is melee attacks as close combat. You've got kind of warps and dodges, and the demo takes you through kind of the intro part of the story, and then once you finish that story beat, it unlocks kind of a battle mode later in the game, which is somewhat what most of a couple months ago when they talked about kind of the different magic systems and having access to a variety of elements and the flow of the combat. Flow of the combat's a lot of fun. I mean, it is actiony. There's a little bit of kind of timing platinum combo based in there. So it's pretty enjoyable. I wanted to play as soon as that demo was over. Like the story had hooked me enough that I just wanted to keep playing. I stayed up late playing it. Like I thought, oh, I'll come back to this, but then the story kind of ramps up and it connects you with the characters. And so if that's the type of storytelling that they're going to go for, it could be a really, there's a lot there. It could be a really successful game. So it was a surprise in terms of how effective it was in communicating some emotion. So, RPGs definitely try for emotion. Sometimes that comes off as kind of heavy-handed or a little ham-fisted, and here it really felt authentic. So it was enjoyable as a demo. It's out there on PlayStation 5 for anybody to check out.
And when does the game launch? Does it launch this week?
I think it's this week, maybe next week. It's a 20-something. Look it up. It is the 22nd. Yeah, so later this week. Yep. Yeah, it does a really solid job of kind of introducing some characters and some mechanics, and even more so really hooking you into the story, that if you think you might be interested, it is going to, chances are it's going to resonate with you, right? If you're not a Final Fantasy fan, if that kind of overwrought narration and is not something that resonates with you, you're probably not going to hit it here. But I think even people that have not played Final Fantasies in the past, because of the fluidity and action of this combat, it may be something that people enjoy. So whether that's means it's a day one purchase is a whole different thing, but I think that it has a broader audience than what a traditional Final Fantasy might have.
So that's the struggle, and where I'm going to put you on the spot a little. So in the last few years, I have been duped ad nauseum by this is the Monster Hunter for the people who don't like Monster Hunter. This is the Souls game for the people who aren't Souls people. And I mean, and every time, I try the game out and it's the same old thing that it was before. But so, is this the Final Fantasy for non-Final Fantasy people?
It might be. It is not the Final Fantasy for you. And I'll say that because even as like cinematic as some of these battles are, or they try to be, in order to do that, they often, at least in the demo, they hinge sometimes on QuickTime events. So in order to make this big splashy attack or dodge out of the way at the last minute, there's this window of time to do the QuickTime event. I think that might, there's a story mode and there's a battle mode in terms of kind of like a difficulty setting. Haven't tried the battle mode to see if it cuts away some of that, but just in terms of the animation and the kind of pre-rendered scenes that they give you when those are happening, I would be surprised if that is actually the case in the battle mode. My thinking is more about that the parry windows are tighter, the dodge windows are tighter in terms of that. It is, if you enjoy that type of kind of, it's a little button mashy, but it's not a Souls like, right? It is not the kind of waiting and figuring out your frames, but it's also not like it's not as frantic as Devil May Cry. You're not juggling pieces, but you are doing some combo pieces. You're you're unlocking abilities that have the ability to jump back and forth between melee and magic, which can kind of combo some things there. So I think it is a very accessible game. I still think that if this is not a franchise that has hooked you in some way or another, or if it is a franchise that has hooked you in a story mode, but you've bounced off in kind of the mechanics, this has a potential to grab players here. I don't think that's necessarily going to, it's accessible for new players, but players that have coming in with some baggage and some experience and know that this is not necessarily what they want. If sitting through the first 20 minutes of cutscenes in order to get to a spot where you can kind of run forward for a little bit turns you off from a game, then yeah, guess what? A Final Fantasy game is probably not going to be the right combo for you. So yes, I think this demo really does a nice job of putting its best foot forward, but it's still a foot that's attached to a Final Fantasy. So I'd say that's my response.
So there we are. If the combat in Final Fantasy has never been the problem. It's all the stuff you have to go through to get to those meaty parts. And then another question I want to ask you as a follow up to that is then, do you think, so we just talked a little bit about, people who are coming to Diablo 4 who aren't Diablo people. People who, some people who are coming to these games who don't have the legacy, right, and don't know where they're coming from, and they're hearing the marketing, which I'm holding a shade back from saying like some of the marketing around these things is disingenuous, but definitely what they're gleaning from it is that the change or the lean in their direction is sufficient to bring them over the edge when it's really not. Do you think that there's going to be a bunch of people who jump on? The game's exclusive to PlayStation. It's not coming out on PC. I doubt you're going to hear a large outcry from the PlayStation community, particularly over an exclusive. But do you think there's some people who are going to hit it and bounce off of it because they thought that the whole thing was going to be like the demo?
That's a good question. I don't know how much of the whole thing is going to be like the demo, right? Like at this point, I am very optimistic about it, but I also want to read more reviews once it actually comes out to see what the full game is and see how representative that piece is. I think people that have played the Final Fantasy VII remake and were okay with kind of that balance, that they'll be satisfied here, that that there was a lot of cutscenes there was a lot of cinematics. I think that this falls in line with that. So if players have some type of experience before, I think that it's something that they'll connect with. I think if it's players that kind of have heard the buzz around Final Fantasy because of Final Fantasy 14 and are interested in trying it, like, this feels tangential in that way in terms of some of the setting, but it feels accessible in terms of some of the combat. I completely, I think the challenge, and you lay out, like, if they are going to lean in the marketing about the challenge of the action, you also have to acknowledge that action comes in between 3 to 5 minutes of cutscenes at times, right? Like, if you're here to kind of move from one adrenaline spot to another, it's a different piece than if you're here to kind of see this ideally an epic story play out.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how it plays out. I mean, Elden Ring went on to more commerciality than I thought it was going to achieve, but I would still contend that about half of the people who went into Elden Ring got Elden Ringed, right? Thinking that they were going into something that was sufficiently non-Souls like, and no, like it was still very heavily in Souls DNA, and all, and I think a lot of people bounced off of it. So it'll be interesting. I think a lot of people rushed into Diablo 4 not getting what Diablo was, right? But listening to the hype about its console instantiation, and I think we're gonna get a bucket of those coming into Final Fantasy as well. I don't think the outcry will be as nearly as loud, but I do think that there will be some small echoes about people who had different impressions of it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like because there is this lineage of the Final Fantasy name, there's some awareness of what people might be getting into. I think I will be curious to see, like, part of where Elden Ring had its legs is not only in the From Software as a developer, but also in the streaming community, right? Like, there was a lot of places that Elden Ring got kind of a long tail because people would keep playing it on streams. And because you'd end up with different builds or different ways to attack problems, what I don't know here is how linear this is going to be, how varied builds are going to play, right? This is not necessarily a Monster Hunter where one weapon is going to totally change your gameplay. But it might, right? Like if you spec yourself to more magic versus melee, but it's hard to know off this demo. So it'll be interesting to see what the news and cycle of stories ends up looking like. All right, let's move from one fantasy game into both a fantasy and maybe a fantasy of
Illusions of grandeur.
That's right, right? Of the Embracer Group. So last week, the Embracer Group announced that they were going to be having some contraction, that after their multi-billion-dollar deal fell through from an unnamed investor, that they were going to need to go through some restructuring and some closures, layoffs in terms of things. And at the same time talking about how they turn it around. Like the Embracer Group, again, if you've been paying attention, this is the group that has been buying up studios left and right in a number for the past couple of years, right? They have Gearbox, they purchased Crystal Dynamics, they purchased Volition, which they melded into Gearbox. They have a variety. Saber Interactive is part of it, and the CEO of Saber Interactive is now the chief operating officer at the Embracer Group as well. So he was out on stage talking about how one of their key areas of the ability to turn around is to leverage the Lord of the Rings franchise. So this is where we go from fantasy in terms of fantasy content to a fantasy in a business model of how lucrative the Lord of the Rings franchise can be or not, and what they're actually going to need to do in order to turn around their loss leaders. So Lord of the Ring franchise, they talk about it as a place where they can really leverage and exploit. I think that there are questions there in terms of how bankable that is. I think Amazon would tell you that it was less bankable than they expected it to be. It was not the Embracer Group that released the most recent Gollum game, which came to terrible reviews and critical reception. But they do have some strong IPs there. I think one of the questions that we've all had as we've been talking about Embracer's acquisitions over the last few years is, how do they sustain it? What's their model look like? Where are they turning profits? They were purchasing studios without necessarily changing a lot of the studio or consolidating. So potentially some of the closures that they're talking about, some of the job loss that they're talking about, may be things that could have happened 2 years ago as they started their acquisitions, right? Like the consolidation of things. But we do not know what that looks like. It is projected that those will take until come in 3 different waves, and the last wave will kind of come around the end of their fiscal year into March of 24. Gentlemen, I think that this story for me is both like a big reality check in terms of where Embracer was going, but also still a lot of question marks in terms of where Embracer is going. What are your thoughts here?
I mean, the thing that's worrisome for me is, I was always a big fan of THQ. I was very happy to see THQ Nordic. Kind of come back. They originally came back as THQ, and it was like a phoenix rising from the ashes. But it was like it was more like Rocky Balboa coming back, right? It was very slow eking, like getting up the ramp, and then amazingly it kind of achieved enough altitude, right, to go into glide, and surprisingly enough, it's been sustainable, right, for the big ticket studios that are kind of name brands that we know. So what I'd hate to see, in this, now going on 3 decades of looking at the gaming industry and studying it, what I would hate to see, unfold as historical events is, them to have gone bankrupt, go away, come back, and then to go bankrupt again. Right, to see Embracer fall apart and see the THQ name go away. There's some good stuff there. When they talk about these the major studios there, THQ Nordic, Gearbox, Crystal Dynamics, Eidos Montreal. With those latter 2 not having originally been part of the Embracer portfolio, and going back to conversations we had earlier where we talked about these acquisitions and their corporate structure, which my guess was that it's not like a Microsoft corporate structure, right? Where, okay, you're a part of Embracer, you're now going to be on Embracer teams, right? These are the offices that we lease out that you're going to occupy, blah, blah, blah. It, like I said, I talked about them before as being kind of a publisher's clearinghouse of game studios. And so I wonder if a lot of these things where they're talking about, hey, there's going to be some layoffs, doesn't necessarily mean that those studios are closing, but just means that they're now no longer going to be Embracer employees. And if they'll still continue working on their...
They're not going to be Embracer employees, but so they have the potential to go back as independent studios, or that they're folding under something else? What is that?
No, I think they'll just go back to being independent. So from what I've read and what I've seen, like the difference here in amassing these studios, when we hear about Microsoft acquiring studios, we hear about them being folded into Microsoft. We hear about them interacting with Microsoft HR. We hear about their employee benefits, whether or not they've changed. Right? There's all types of corporate speak over that transition. But with Embracer, like, these guys acquire studios and we hear nothing. And so I don't...
Yeah, not even the things we've heard have said we expect business as usual to continue, right? Like, it wasn't even there were statements about not a whole lot changing. It was very, mild in terms of any type of adjustments.
But to me, it almost seems like they're in almost like an investment firm, just buying up companies, buying up stuff. Not really, like Game said, it's not like it's Microsoft where it's an actual company. It's just they're just buying stuff up to buy it and to hopefully try to flip it maybe or something. That's what investment companies usually do. So that's how I always saw it, and I was kind of surprised when this came out. So it's like, hey, they're actually giving a statement for once. Like, we've never heard anything from, like you said, we've never heard anything from them before. So just kind of weird, and I guess I kind of hate the wording too, like exploiting. Come on, you couldn't have thought of a different word there. That's just me. Maybe I'm not, once again, I'm pie nitpicking, but it just seems like it's, hey, we want to just get it out there to get it. Once again, it sounds like an investment firm. We just wanted to get it out there to make money. That's it, basically.
So Tao's talking about the language from the Saber and Embracer head of regarding the Lord of the Rings franchise and IP about exploiting it is the quote that's been out there, right? Like, yes, there are definitely some better PR speak choices that they could have made.
Yeah, so like we were saying, it's not like, it's not. I don't feel for what we're seeing. I don't feel like they're being acquired by Embracer, and an Embracer IT guy is showing up, right, issuing you an Embracer laptop, giving you your Embracer email, and pointing you to the Embracer cloud environment where all of your game development is now going to happen, right? I feel like it's a very kind of like Tal said, right? It's we're going to reincorporate you into our LLC. Maybe they have some benefits packages that you can buy into. I don't think that they're like corporate overhead like you would normally have, right, with a company with benefits packages. And they're under and so they're part of the publishing planning, right, in terms of like when their games are supposed to come out. But I don't think it's this whole interweaving. So like I said, when they talk about thousands of job cuts, I think a lot of these studios, which are probably still working out of some dude's house, right, like the No Man's Sky guys were for a while, I think they're just going to go back to doing what they were doing before, and this relationship is going to end. For a lot of them, for some of the big studios, it'll be interesting to see how they're impacted. It's going to be interesting to see how Dark Horse Media is impacted. I think the thing that I get concerned about, again, ties back to what Tao was saying about the exploiting is, he talks about, Cart says, that's a much better use of resources than some of the other projects that some of our teams have been working on. I'm like, dude, you guys are the ones who ran around and banged the trash can lid about you having 120 something games actively in development. I'm like, those teams were working on stuff that you guys greenlit, right? Or that you guys at least tacitly approved of. Now you're talking about converting all, and I mean, to be quite honest, and this is the gamer side of me, less the business side, I don't want to see THQ Nordic, Gearbox, Crystal Dynamics, and Eidos Montreal all working on some Lord of the Rings thing. That license, quite honestly, hasn't been super lucrative, right? I mean, you go way back to, must have been like the 2000, must have been early 2000 when there was the Lord of the Rings real-time strategy game that, like, when you bought it on PC, it came on like 5 DVDs, which I just didn't understand. Kind of before Steam really kind of took off, right? But like that was there. The Shadow of Mordor games have been there. There was a brief time in the sun for the RTS for the MMO. But other than that, I don't really know that there's been that much there. And I gotta tell you, a partnership with Amazon doesn't necessarily light my nether regions on fire as far as like thinking this thing is going to take off and and be some big bright star. I mean, Amazon's had one success, and that's been Lost Ark.
Yeah, but even Lost Ark was a Korean developed game that they brought over here. I don't even know that I would count that as an Amazon Studio success. Yeah. It's a publishing success.
And so Paul's Gaming in chat says they lost out on a $2 billion investment recently also. Yeah, Paul, we mentioned that earlier. And I mean, I think that's going to be one of the most interesting tales of the tape is that they're probably under NDA at this point to like not disclose that, or at least under some, gentlemanly agreement to not do so. But, it'll be super interesting to find out who that deal was with and how and why it fell through.
Well, and Paul's right. Like, I think that loss of that $2 billion investment really is the impetus of why they need to make this call at this point. Like, their hope was that was going to kind of string them along until they get a couple of other releases or some projects out that they can strum up some more investment for. But without that, there's no way that they haven't been operating in the red, because all they've been doing is acquisitions. And I think it'll be interesting to see, and reading some of the comments out in the industry around this is, do people treat it, does Embracer treat it like a Microsoft Studios, or like when Activision Blizzard came together and you're going to eliminate PR and HR because you can kind of centralize some of those things? Does it go in that direction like you're talking about, Game Logic, of kind of pulling everybody together under one banner or does it go in the direction where they have been operating of allowing them to be independent studios, and then they just, like you said, they just start lopping off some of them. They just have fewer of those independent studios, and they allow them to be independent, but they're just are holding on to the ones that maybe they feel more confident about, or that they, yeah. So I'm very curious on where this goes. I am, I guess my biggest piece is the economic model in my brain tells me, like, how did it take so long to get here? Like, there wasn't anything on the books that told them that this wasn't the direction that they were going, especially after they've had kind of mediocre releases. And even when they didn't, they were still, it was a lot of investment dollars and time in some games that didn't necessarily hit the way they hoped to.
Yeah, I feel like I'm watching Kingdoms of Amalur happen again, but like on a exponentially larger scale. So Paul's gaming in chat says if they needed that investment, then it's starting to feel like a pyramid scheme.
Yep.
And I wonder, is there a place for something like what Embracer was trying to do that was a publisher's clearinghouse, that was like they bought Dark Horse, and I don't know how much knowledge sharing there's going on, right? But at the company level, and it seems like Embracer has at least some notion of kind of what it was trying to do business wise, but I've never seen any evidence of any like real creative leadership about like, making a plan for getting video games out and what kind of video games. But I wonder if there's room for them to be something like a Boom Studios or a Dynamite, or, where it's, hey, we're not gonna tell you what video game to make, but if you get something decent put together and you want us to publish it, come in and give us the pitch and we'll talk about it. But I don't know. Well, I guess we'll have to see where it goes.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see where this kind of shakes out over the next year or so. So we talked about Crystal Dynamics being part of the Embracer group after being bought up by Square Enix. So our next story talks about another game studio that had their most recent game published by Square Enix, and that is People Can Fly. People Can Fly of Outriders. Outriders was published by Square Enix, but the most recent news story here that you pulled, Game Logic, has them developing something new, something of a mystery.
Yeah, so not a lot here to report on that aspect of the story, but this story over on IGN, Outriders dev People Can Fly working on mystery Microsoft IP. People Can Fly worked on Gears of War Judgment in 2013. So I've seen a lot of speculation from people, right? They could be working on Crimson Sky, because that's where the codename Maverick comes from, Top Gun, blah, blah, blah. In theories that, maybe they're working on a Judgment remake, or maybe they're working on Gears 6. I don't know. I think the thing that unfortunately people blew right by, and which I almost missed also, is that this arrangement between them and Microsoft is a work for hire model. And so the intention here is that they will work on this game, and if it goes successfully, they will at that point get hired as Xbox employees. And it is not a work for acquisition, so it does not sound like they would be coming over as People Can Fly, but they would be coming over as a team that would theoretically still stick together, but would be folded somewhere into the Xbox Game Studios makeup. And so if you think about it, this is kind of like, when Google bought the HTC design team, right? And didn't acquire HTC, but brought the people in, right? And kept them whole for a time, right? To become, part of their organization. Or I was reading today, actually, I had totally missed that the Mad Catz brand name has come back. And I was like, how did that happen when Logitech bought Mad Catz? But Logitech bought the design team for Mad Catz, and the manufacturing people who were still in China actually then brought the brand name back. So, and I'm not saying that they're talking about hiring part of People Can Fly, but I'm saying they're talking about hiring them in, not necessarily bringing them over under their brand name theoretically, but the team would still be the team, and then they'll have to figure out where they go in Xbox. So DBQ and I talked a little bit before in the pre-show, and I was like, this presents a lot of I love People Can Fly. I was a big Painkiller fan way back in the day. But
I forgot that they did Painkiller.
Yeah,
Right? I'm thinking about
that to me,
Bulletstorm and Judgment.
yeah,
Yeah.
that to me is their real claim to fame was Painkiller. And they did like tons of DLCs and tons of riffs on that game. It would be so this presents a lot of possibilities for how they would be folded in. I could see them just going and becoming part of the coalition and working on Gears of War. I would be interested to see them stay whole as a team and not get folded into 343i, but become a team that worked on a mode or a module of Halo. Maybe they could join. I can't remember what the name is of the third party or the outsourced studio that was brought in and is working on something for Halo with 343i, creative something or other like that. People have speculated that they're working on a battle royale. I don't know how true that is, but I could see it would be interesting to see them work on Halo. I think it could be super interesting for them to actually be folded into Bethesda and given the Rage IP and see them do something with that. Or what I think is a very natural fit for them is getting folded into even id or ID and doing something kind of in the Doom space, or just becoming another shooter studio within Bethesda publishing, that worked, in and around and alongside, Machine Games or some of those other shooter kind of oriented studios. So it'd be interesting. I'm super happy. Look, Activision and Blizzard will be fine. Microsoft doesn't need them, right? They don't need to acquire a multi-billion-dollar publisher that is the fifth or sixth, size publisher in the industry already. Bringing the people can fly. That is a just and righteous endeavor that I would applaud Microsoft for doing, for pulling People Can Fly out of like the morass that they've been in with Square Enix, where Outriders hasn't been profitable, getting a team that has put their shoulder to grindstone and tried to do the best things they could. I didn't realize that People Can Fly used to be part of Epic for a while. So they were independent, then became part of Epic, then were sold back off.
That's right, because wasn't Bulletstorm while they were under the Epic banner?
I think it may have been. But if Microsoft is going to throw its coin around the industry, let's not worry about the Activisions and the Blizzards and the Kings who are making billions of dollars already. Let's maybe throw a little bit at People Can Fly, who actually need that extended hand to continue being a going concern.
Yeah, they also worked on the Save the World mode in Fortnite.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
So Paul's Gaming Live in the chat says the studio I was thinking about is Certain Affinity.
Yes, that's what I looked up as well. Yep. Thanks, Paul. All right, let's move on to another Microsoft story here. Tao, you've got one about Microsoft coming out and saying that they are no longer developing for the Xbox One console and are focused solely on the Series.
Yeah, so in an interview with Axios, I believe is how you pronounce it, the head of Microsoft Studios, Matt Booty, said they've moved on exclusively to Gen 9, referring just to Xbox Series X and S, and that they won't be doing any more development. Any of their Microsoft studios will no longer be doing development for just the Xbox One brand. But any current games still will be able to be played on those systems, obviously through the cloud services. So you can still play them through that. He also confirmed that they'll still be developing natively for the Xbox Series S also, which I don't know why he had to reiterate that, since he kind of said that before. But he acknowledged that it's been more work for the devs, and that they will be now that they're working on on their second round of games for the system. So hopefully they can plan a little bit better, and they're more comfortable basically with the new system, or that system, I shouldn't say the new system, which I don't remember if we mentioned last week. They actually didn't. There was some hardware announcements.
Yeah, right. The 1 terabyte SKU for the Series X, Series S. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, all black instead of white like the current one is. But I mean, other than that, it's just the same materials, other than the bigger hard drive. But I guess eventually they're going to have to start cut the cord there with the old generation. So I don't think it's a huge surprise. But you can still, like I said, you can still play those current gen games on those old systems. So it's kind of a plus, which I've been doing. I've been I have my Xbox One X still hooked up to a TV and play it quite frequently, I would say, using the cloud services. So it's actually kind of nice.
Todd, why don't you go ahead and stay on the mic for the last story here?
The game.
One thing-
had a comment?
One thing I wanted to jump in. So, also out of this interview, or I think out of this interview, could have come out of somewhere else because Matt Booty's done a ton of interviews since the showcase. There was also a question about or a quote about the Series S, which there has been some complaining about from some developers. I think it's a very small, isolated number of developers, and kind of look. Coming out of the software development, software engineering discipline, he said, look, the Series S isn't going away. You're just going to have to plan better. And I kind of commiserate with him, right? Like, I mean, it's a tough discussion to have with developers, but like, look, we deployed multiple platforms, right? Multiple hardware sets, multiple targets. Like, this is not new, right? Like even when I'm doing a web app, right? It's got to go to Chrome, it's got to go to Safari, it's got to go to Microsoft Edge. And yes, it's great now that Edge, runs on Chromium, but that wasn't always the case, right? It was a different browser kernel before, and those things have to be accommodated, and you accommodate them by planning more effectively. So it's not entirely different architecture. It's the same architecture. It's fewer resources, right? And we've had to learn to contend with that since time immemorial. I hate to sound caustic and hate to sound right, but like I don't hear this from Apple developers who need to deploy an app that runs on the Mac and on the iPhone and on the iPad, and all those things have different resources. There could be a complaint that there needs to be better harmonization across the hardware targets. That's absolutely more to me a actionable discussion, right? Where there's some meat on the bone, for things to be worked out. But just I got to deploy to a different hardware target. Like I'm sorry, right? It's video games. You're not going to get one hardware target to deploy against.
I mean, it's kind of no difference than PC development, I would assume, since obviously you have different cards and processor. Probably even worse, actually, because like you said, at least it's the actual architecture itself is, pretty much the same between the two systems. So, but they have voiced their opinions.
That's right. It'll be interesting to see how that SKU sells, and if they continue at the lower, if the $299 one continues, or if they start to phase that out. Or they, now that they have multiple companies creating the external expansion cards, right? We're not just dealing with Seagate, that there's some options there in terms of additional storage, things like that. So
my guess is that SKU's going to go away, although I was way wrong when I said the same thing about the Switch. But the difference is, when I think that, I lean back on like the historical trajectory that the 360 took, where each time they came out with the bigger hard drive SKU or things like that, then like the old SKU just went away.
Yeah, right. At that price point, you could see them slashing it down to $299 come. Probably not this Christmas because it's only coming out in September, but by the time they get to next year's holiday cycle, it's easy to, and the cost of production has probably gone down enough that they can do that without taking much of a loss either. So, Tao, you got one more news story here before we wrap it up and head into some closeout games here. What's your last news story?
Yeah, so this is on GameIndustry.biz, and it's about Dan Houser. I was going to say resurfacing, but I guess this was kind of known already, that he had started up a new company. It's called Absurd Ventures, and they're going to be building Absurd Ventures to create new universes and to tell great stories wherever and however we can. So they're currently working on a new IP, and this is, I guess, not just video games too. They kind of want to do movie or shows and animation, books, graphic novels, and scripted podcasts too, which is kind of weird. I shouldn't say weird, but it's just that I've never seen that before on other studios. But They're currently in Santa Monica, California. They're based out of there. So hopefully we'll see something. Well, we probably won't see anything anytime soon, I would think. I think it was first announced back in March of 2020. Um, and so it was now 3 years later that they're officially saying, hey, we're working on something. But, you never know how long that's going to take. So obviously, if you don't know who Dan Houser was, he was a co-founder of Rockstar Games. And he left, I think it was the year before, a couple years before the founding of that studio. I was trying to find an article. I think 2019, I believe. Oh, in 2019, he took a hiatus, extended hiatus.
Yep.
And then.
Yeah, after they got through Red Dead Redemption 2 is kind of when he stepped away. Yep.
Yeah. So just kind of, I guess resurfacing, saying, hey, we're still here. We're going to make a game. And, along with all these other kind of media stuff out there. So it's just interesting to see that there's something, obviously in being worked on.
All right. Yeah, I'd be curious to see what they come up with and how much, recently Dan Houser had in terms of hands-on with, I think he was all those reports coming out of Red Dead and the postmortems in terms of how hands-on he was, what that means for a new studio, a new game design, things like that. So, well, gentlemen, let's move into our third segment here with our rundown of other games that we've been playing. I'm going to start because one of the games that was announced last week at the Xbox showcase was the most recent Dotnod game, the Jusant, which is that climbing game, kind of pastel-y, a little cartoony climbing game that you saw there during the press conference. There's a demo out on PC right now. It's a game that's coming to Xbox and PC in September. So I had a chance to play the demo. Well, anybody has a chance to play the demo. I just played the demo. It is both calming and also causing me to lean forward as I play, right? You are kind of in this relatively low risk environment. You have a lot of kind of anchors that you're putting in. So if you drop, you're not falling all the way down to your death. You're just kind of having to swing back and kind of start over from a section of your climb. But your climbing is very much a left trigger, right trigger, moving your handholds and moving the stick to kind of angle where you're going. You can do a little bit of a kind of boost yourself up into certain spots, but it is very methodical, which is in some ways very calming, but also as you start climbing up higher and the handholds gets a little more tricky, it's also, I find myself kind of leaning forward, trying to make that right. Like there's just this right amount of tension of trying to hold on and figure out where that is. Like if you've ever climbed on a rock wall or out in nature, that idea of figuring out where your arms are going to go and how much you can support and how you're going to cross over and if that's even possible. So there is a little bit of gaminess in this, that it is not simply just a physics demo in terms of climbing, but it is not just as simple as like a Wii Fit type of climbing wall or whatever. There were some things like that. So there's some nuance here, some strategy, but I'll be very curious to see what the larger game is like. But the demo is, again, just like the Final Fantasy one, very engaging. It kind of pulls you into this world, that art style. So again, that's out there free on Steam. Steam's got a number of demos for some of the things that were just announced over the past couple weeks. And actually this coming week on Steam, we also get Steam's Next Fest, which means we'll end up with a whole bunch of other demos as well for upcoming games. So I'm sure I'll have more to talk about then, but for right now, Jusant was a pleasant experience and well kind of affirmed that it was one of my most excited games coming out of the Xbox showcase. So, all right, Game Logic, you playing some more Age of Wonders 4? You've been playing this a little bit before, haven't you?
Yeah, so it's my second time. I just toe dipped into it before. This is my second time coming back around to it, trying to spend a little more time with it. One question I did have on Jusant, we've talked in recent weeks. When I've talked about train simulators and driving large vehicles, and I often talk about in racing games, that point where you're drifting around a corner where you feel like the tire just lose that smidge of traction enough that it's going to get away from you. Is there that kind of effect in Jusant where like you're climbing, and then you can kind of, if you play it back in your mind in slow motion, you can feel when things start getting shaky and start to unravel, and they're just going to go south, and you're not going to be able to recover?
Yes, there is, and in part because of the way that, at least the way that I think about when I'm playing like a climbing game, and I've done this in VR as well, right? Like you get yourself up on some handholds, and by the nature of a climbing game, or by the nature of doing a rock wall climb in real life, like a choice you made starts you on a trajectory that you may not necessarily have the right reach to get to the next spot, or it might be too close and being able to support your weight. So yeah, you can kind of see like, oh, if I wouldn't have gone here, I can tell that I started to kind of have to second guess my spots. Like it wasn't, so there is some of that. Like there's not necessarily a rewind feature. You just kind of drop yourself back down, start climbing back up. There is, I haven't totally engaged with it. There looks to be like not the same as like a stamina meter in like a Breath of the Wild sense, but there's certainly a meter there. But again, if you're kind of pacing yourself, at least in the beginning parts of the demo, you're able to make those, they're not really trying to stretch you and pull you and have you kind of suspend by one hand. But I would assume by the nature of what the game is, that those climbing challenges will be more and more difficult, or that by the way the nature of the game is, that there will be kind of a main path for the narrative that they are telling you. You have this little, let's just say there's this little creature that's in your backpack that you're trying to get up the mountain in some capacity, and it doesn't, there's not a lot of spoken word storytelling, so you get some kind of atmospheric storytelling. But I would think that by the nature of the game, you're going to end up with, you could take multiple paths up the face of a wall to find some other things. Like if you're trying to fully explore the mountain and the cliff, that some of those will be more of your challenge pieces as well. So I'll be very curious to see how this scales in terms of challenge, because it could be very kind of relaxing and engaging and really have them kind of lay into the narrative, but it could also be something that's kind of aggressively challenging in places. And as we saw in the demo, or at least in the trailer from the Xbox showcase, like you start to get these abilities where you're kind of allowing handholds to grow and things like that as well. So early in the game, you don't have that power. You don't start with that power. So it's something that you gain along the way.
Very cool. Very cool. So Age of Wonders 4, I think the thing that most starkly stands out to me, in this outing is the level of complexity that's there. At its heart of heart, Age of Wonders 4 leans a lot into kind of the same places that Heroes of Might and Magic leans. But it's a big, and what was the other? Gosh, dang it! Disciples. I think a little bit like the Disciple series too.
Sure, which is like in that Path of Eternia type of way.
Yeah, and Disciples doesn't get enough, praise and the vocality that it should. But you go around the map. It's strategic. You're maneuvering units around the map, and and again, when you get into combat, then it zooms in, and the combat is turn based. So there's just a ton of stuff to uncover in Age of Wonders. You have the very basic mechanics, but then like at the strategic level, you assemble armies. The armies go around and they can make roads like as they're transiting. So then you see roads starting to develop in your cities. There is naval combat. So it used to be the units just embarked on ships, and I want to say even in Age of Wonders 3, the ships like would just engage in like kind of ships passing each other in the night kind of combat. Like you wouldn't zoom in and actually do like naval combat, but like now it's kind of hokey naval combat. It's basically the same units just on the water, but they're supposedly in ships, and so they supposedly still have their ranged attacks, and then the ships attack each other using the like characteristics of people. So like I'm like, you guys may as well just have them be on land. Like it's the same thing. Regardless, right? Water effects are expensive and very difficult to do, and they're doing water effects and yada yada yada. So now there's naval combat. You go out from the shore and you like do amphibious landings, or you engage with sea monsters at sea, yada yada yada. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff. You can do excavations. And I think it's been in Age of Wonders the whole time. But as your town increases in population, then you can annex other nearby provinces in terms of geographical area, and so your town like gradually expands and gets bigger and bigger over time. You build farms, right? As you could build outposts, and the outposts have their own improvements. So, in civilization-like fashion, it very rapidly becomes a lot of stuff that you're managing, right? Rapidly kind of accelerates beyond just, moving some chess piece type armies around the board and having, your main town kind of churn out units to attach to those armies. So and then you have to keep track of the tactical piece, and then you get spells that are both tactical, but you get spells that are also strategic. So, I'm raising an army, but one of the strategic spells that I got allows me to just magically create a unit. So I'm able to rapidly expand armies without necessarily having to wait the total number of turns to have them, be cranked out of, my garrison buildings and stuff. So, it's super interesting. I'm playing, and it's the biggest charm to me of AOW4 is that it jumps you right into a conquer the world kind of campaign. There's not a bunch of story stuff around it. Tao, you mentioned, I can't remember what RTS I think it was that you had latched onto that, you were, Age of Empires 2, I think you were mentioning. 4. Okay. And, yeah. And you mentioned that, you were going into the campaign and how you're like me, you don't like the campaign. It's like, I don't need the contrivances of your goofy story. Just give me all the chess pieces and let me decide right how I'm going to use the chess pieces. AOW4, does that. So I'm playing notionally, theoretically, an evil faction, the Arctica, I think is the name of I can't remember the name of the faction. It's got a character creator, so you can change your hero. You run into, other races on there, so you can, make peace treaties and yada, yada, yada with them. So it's pretty enjoyable. Like I said, rapidly increasing in complexity, right? Turn by turn. I'm like 13 turns into my scenario, and, I'm already having I already have a pretty complex checklist of things, right, that I need to go through and make sure that I'm hitting, but tons of fun. Game looks wonderful. Playing it on a ultra wide screen, so 34-inch, 3440 by 1440p, automatically scales, so that doesn't give you any graphic options to kind of tweak that or whatever. But it's playing great. So having a good time with it.
Nice. Game, stick on the mic here for a minute, and let's get your racing update here on the PS5.
Yeah, not a ton to add. Playing WRC Generations. It's interesting to go back to this game in the wake of the whole 30 frames per second controversy about Starfield, because and then I was pulling the thread on kind of what Forza Horizon 5 was, which is 4K 60, 4K 30 on the Series X, and then kind of asking questions around the gaming community about what are the expectations and demands for Forza Motorsport. I really hope it's more than 4K 60, 4K 30, because Gran Turismo has like 8 different modes of things that it supports across 4K, 1440p, VR, RAL. So it's just got a lot of options for the user to tweak the experiences they want. So WRC Generations is only 4K 60, 4K 30. Played around with it in both modes. As I mentioned before, it's the version that came out last year. It's their last year with the license. The license now went to Codemasters, so interesting to see what the Dirt series is going to do with that Dirt and Dirt Rally, hopefully. But I'm having a good time. It's hard. It's hard. It's you go into some of these you play the super stages or whatever that are 6-7 kilometers. You go into the power stage that's like a 26 kilometer, just grueling 13-minute run, 15-minute run of just hard wired in focus to try and keep this car from hitting some weird rock outcropping and just totally ruining you mentioned DBQ. We talked about the rock climbing and how you make that one mistake, and how you can I made an error in tire selection, so I didn't buy into the rain prediction, so I didn't take as many wet tires. And once you make that tire selection, you're stuck in it, for 4 stages of rally racing. So it's pretty hard. I did not try my wheel and pedals with it, although I have committed to I want to try out the wheel and pedals that I have that turns out are compatible with the PlayStation 5. But having a good time with it. Not as negatively impacted by the 4K 30 as I thought I would be, but we'll keep playing around with it. It's very, I appreciate it's very deeply technical, right? Despite the fact that it's maybe not the most graphically impressive game that's out there, but for a rally game, maybe that technical piece is the more important one.
So let's move from something very technical to something maybe not so technical. Okay, Tao, I got a confession to make. This is the week after over a month, maybe 6 weeks, I finally uninstalled Hanakai Star Rail.
Oh.
Got to the grind spot, uninstalled it. This was a week of a new release of a new season of Marvel Snap. I didn't install it. Made through the kind of fear of missing out of the Miles Morales season and the Spider-Verse. But you are playing something on mobile. You've talked about baseball before on mobile. So what brought you back to this? Is you continuing your season from before, or what got you re-engaged here?
Yeah, I've never stopped. So I've been playing this game pretty much since I had.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, since I had let everybody know I was playing this back on the show, whatever, a month or so ago, a month or two. So I finally was able to get past the rookie modes, which took me like 3 seasons, I believe. Now I'm in the pro league. It's getting a little bit harder. I do have some troubles here and there. I've actually lost a few games every now and then. But now, so before it was pretty much. It wasn't like a full season, obviously, in baseball, but in the rookie league. But now you actually do have to play. I think it's like 100 and I can't remember. It's over 100 games. I can't remember what the exact number was. So now when I'm going through this pro league, I'm actually using. There's like this. I guess it's like a stamina or like a lightning ticket or ability you get.
Basically, yeah, it's your free-to-play kind of timer piece, right?
Yeah, so I just been collecting them because I really realized I use them because the seasons before were really long. Now I have started using those again now because it was, it's just like I'm not going to play 152 games. Unlike Game Logic, I don't want to go through that kind of commitment. So I do that I'll just keep hitting that thing and hitting it until as I'm winning, and then when I hit a loss, then I'll play a game after that. And sometimes it's just like in baseball, you'll play like 2 or 3 games in a series or something like that. So that's a little bit different now. I've upgraded some of my players. I've got a bunch of I bought a bunch of bronze players in the previous league, in the rookie league, and now I have like one silver player, which I kind of modeled it after myself.
So are you doing that with in-game currency or external purchases?
No, just in-game currency. You can buy money to get more diamonds and other currencies that they have in the game, but I don't. I've saved so much from the last season that I was able to kind of just buy what I needed and upgrade what I needed. So yeah, just all in game right now. But yeah, no, I just kind of I do like at least a couple of games a day or so. Like I said, this pretty much just has replaced any other games like Snap and all, and even Vampire Survivors and stuff like that. So I'm able to kind of just plow through the seasons now. So it's fun. I mean, I really like it. It's like I said, kind of Wii Sports-ish, where you just do the batting and the pitching. You don't do really in the field, and you can. I think I mentioned this too. You can kind of say where your feelers want to throw to. So like a lot of times, like if I just let them throw, like for some reason they take like a long time I don't know if they're just like, making sure they can, they get the right, pose or whatever. But I just hit the button to whatever base I want to, and he'll throw it immediately, or she, because there's men and women in the game. So that part's kind of nice. But you really don't. Other than that, you can't like move the person in the field or anything like that when you're on defense. So it's just batting and pitching. But yeah, I'm still having a great time on it. And like I mentioned earlier, that's pretty much all I've been playing this week. I have played a little bit of Rocket League and Fortnite, also, and a little bit of Rust with my son. Actually, this past couple weeks, but he's kind of fallen off of that now, just because that game is hard. Like if you don't have like a really big player base, so you can obviously keep your base, up to date and defendable and stuff like that, because it's only PvP. Right. Well, I mean, it depends on the server you're playing on, I guess, but most of the ones we pick are always like just pure PvP. So someone can raid you when you're offline, or whatever like that. Or there's huge groups that will come and get you, and you obviously can't do anything. There's only two of us. So, but other than that, yep, this is the only thing I've been playing this past week.
Nice. Yeah, there's something about just being able to pick up a mobile game real quick, whether it's a handheld or whether it's on a mobile device. There's a real benefit to that. I appreciate you talking about playing with your son. It is Father's Day after all, gentlemen, so it's nice to be able to enjoy our hobby and our passions with our children. I've been doing the same this past week, as I talked about a couple weeks ago, picking up some kind of retro systems, and my son and I sitting down and playing some DS games together. Back when, the DS, you would do the it was like the download play, right? You on Mario Kart or things like that. Like you download part of the game and you could go through, even if you didn't have the game in your cartridge slot, you could still play the game with the person that did. You would only have certain characters or certain aspects to do. So it's been really kind of fun. Again, this is my son who graduated high school, and so he's been on this kick of going back through games that he remembers as a little person, but appreciating them, experiencing them with kind of a larger context, with more kind of gaming knowledge, both in terms of the industry, but also just in terms of ability. So it's been fun to experience that as a parent and as a enthusiast in gaming as well. So on that rosy, cheery note for Father's Day, gentlemen, any other final thoughts before we head out for the week?
Just one quick soundbite in the realm of the playing a little bit of. Also made my return to World of Warships this week on PC, and playing that in the background with the other stuff.
Nice. Well, yes, if we're going to be fully transparent in terms of what I've been playing, I'm still playing a lot of Madden, right? I'm making my way. I just lost a playoff game, and the other real life player in the league made his way to the Super Bowl. So yes, there's always these games that we kind of chip away at, but we don't always talk about here because there's not a lot of new things, not a lot of changes, but sometimes they are just part of our weekly experiences. So, all right, gentlemen, thank you for the discussion tonight. I'm sure we'll have more to come. So we will be back next week for episode 296. Tao, you will be leading us through that episode. That will be, I think, all three of us back here again. So for myself, DBQ Hams, Game Logic, and Tao Master 99, this has been the Enough to Keep Going podcast for the week of June 18th. Thanks, Paul's Gaming, for stopping by, giving us some commentary, and I appreciate it. It's always good to have that interaction. So anybody else listening, we are glad that you're here. Come on and join us. Until we talk to you next time, play the games you love those you play with, and be good to yourself. Good night, everybody.